when you're passionate about something, you put 150% into what it is. You're not just punching a clock. You're not just a 9 to 5. It's the way you think. It's the way you live. It's the way, I live this business. This is not something that I dreamt of and created. It's something I live.
Welcome to Second Act Stories. Every 2 weeks, we take a close look at a remarkable story, a courageous individual pursuing a more rewarding life in a second act. I'm your host, Andy Levine.
And as always, I'm Scott Merritt, Andy's co-host for today's episode. So today, we're going to meet a real-life angel, and her name is Carolyn Curtin. Andy, tell us how Carolyn became an angel.
Well, it didn't start out that way. Right out of high school, she trained and worked as a hairstylist, and she still does a bit of that on the side. But as you're here, her primary job is the founder and owner of Salvage Angel by the Sea, one of the country's largest restoration warehouses based in Asbury Park, New Jersey.
Now, you're based in New Jersey, she's in New Jersey, and you went to see her in person. And you kicked things off with an audio tour of her 20,000 square foot facility. 20,000?
It's a huge space, and there are hundreds of thousands of items for sale and for rent, mostly by film production crews. Here we go with Carolyn Curtin's, a.k.a. the Salvage Angels, second act story. All right, let's walk and talk.
Okie doke. Let's start at the very beginning.
It's a very good place to start, right?
You want me to start singing?
No.
Okay,
well, you could. That's fine. Okay.
So basically, I do instruct people to start at the beginning because our way of processing things is to take photos of everything that you might be interested in, and then I get prices at the end because the inventory is so vast and so very, very different.
This place is amazing. 20,000 square feet of stuff. Reclaimed lumber, moldings, exterior doors, custom-made rugs, stained glass, lighting, plumbing fixtures, tile, furniture, nautical fittings, bathtubs, mantles, housewares. Just incredible. Bring stuff to you, or you and it's all things that were headed to the junkyard, but Carolyn figured out a way to reclaim and save it for others. I just have to, I'm in the salt and pepper shaker department now. Like 50 different salt and pepper shakers. It's amazing. 50, maybe 1,000, who knows?
Yeah, so again, here's your Pyrex and all things that have been in everyone's kitchen since, the beginning of my time anyway.
I can't imagine more ugly Pyrex. But I guess some people
love
them.
Beautiful. Look at that one.
Okay. Oh, yes, that's true. Okay.
One. Have you ever seen that one before?
This was in my kitchen right here. I can tell you that. Growing up.
The marvelous Mrs. Maisel made them very, very famous, if you will. But
okay.
This one is particularly
that's beautiful. Yes. Okay.
So here is your crystal and your colored glass, your pottery.
After the tour, we sat down on a vintage couch that could have come out of my grandmother's 1960s apartment, and Carolyn shared her story. She grew up in New Jersey as the youngest of a family with 9 kids. I understand your first career was as a hairstylist.
Yes.
Tell me a little about that.
I went to Wilfred Academy right out of high school, immediately out of high school, and got my cosmetology license, which is a little broader than just hair. Okay. Cosmetology, you can do anything. You can do face, you can do nails, you can do all of it. I'm still friends with the gentleman that I, quote, apprenticed for. Okay. And so you take in your clients and you greet them and you shampoo them and comb them and get them ready for their stylist. But you do everything except for actually style their hair. And it's good. It's always good, I think, to have an apprenticeship in anything that you do. I will always enjoy the work. I will always, have my hand in it somehow, just not in the same capacity.
Take me to the origins of Salvage Angel. My sense is that this began when you purchased your first home.
Yes.
And just walk me through that home and tell us about what that meant to you.
I bought my home here in Asbury Park 20 years ago, and things were still a bit rough, to say the least. And the gentleman that I was working with brought me to a house with a chain link fence around it and caution tape across the porch and a hasp holding the boarded up door. And he opened the padlock and let me into the foyer. And I was stricken and I panicked. And I knew at that point that I had to purchase the house. And it was a HUD house. It was up for auction. And so I had a week's time to get all my ducks in a row and get my bid in. And because the house literally was almost a carbon copy of the home that I was raised in as a child, where my parents had all their 9 children and up in the Oranges.
Just give us a little more flavor of it. It was a Victorian home, you said?
Yes.
Tough neighborhood?
At the time, yes, it was. There was mostly rental apartments in every multifamily home on the block. I was the only homeowner living in the area. And then quickly, within the next year or two, there were people looking around, and I'd be out there waving my pom-poms and saying, yes, please buy.
Come join me.
Yeah, come join the madness. You won't regret it. And fast forward 20 years, and we are looking at a completely different Asbury Park now.
So you now own this house, and did it need a lot of work?
In retrospect, it needed a lot less than what I see people undertaking. My house was all original, except for the kitchen. So still to this day, my house has all its original floors and its original plaster walls, all of its exterior cypress trim work. And it was fantastic quality. And as such, the woman who lived in it for a very long time cared for it the best that she could, just preserving it and not allowing harm to come to it. So when I got there, aside from the cosmetic things and the porch needing fixing and painting, all of the light fixtures and all of the hardware had been stripped from it during its sale process. So my home was built by a woman in 1900, and it's been in the possession of a woman ever since.
While the house was generally in good shape, the kitchen was a problem.
The kitchen, which was dreadful, that was the only thing that was not original, and it was dreadful. I had a challenge ahead of me to try to figure out where the kitchen should be and what it should consist of. And when I called in the kitchen people and had them do a layout, and they do that lovely printout and what it's going to look like, it just felt wrong. And I couldn't go forward with it.
Because it was too new and different from what it was previously?
Because it was too new from what everything was in the house.
Okay.
In the home. So it just didn't feel right to me.
And did that get you on, I've got to find authentic pieces now to redo this kitchen?
Yes. So I proceeded to gather pieces of kitchen. And the biggest challenge was the kitchen sink that I was looking for. Back then, eBay was just getting started and hot. And every kitchen sink that I would find that I would be interested in, I would get grossly outbid trying to purchase. So it kind of sparked something in my head.
And you started trying to source that kitchen sink somewhere around the Asbury Park area?
Yes, there began a very grand scale gentrification. And they were literally clear cutting blocks of buildings and homes and storefronts and anything that was standing in the way of progress and being able to build new.
And you were watching all this old stuff just being trashed, essentially?
Oh, trashed in a big way.
Okay.
Yeah, just clear-cutted and hauled away. And so I actually introduced myself to the developer and then got permission to start to extract things of any significance or value, some of it historical, some of it structural, some of it just beautiful. As people were purchasing around me, I was offering these things to them so that they could at least have things worth looking at in homes that they were purchasing that had been torn apart and made into multifamily homes and done so cheaply. So whether it be columns or railings and things of that nature to redo their porch or other embellishments that were coming from these other places that were being knocked down.
So you're going through all these old structures, taking out the architecturally valuable things and that sort of thing for your own home, but also you start to see other people coming to you and say, hey, I'm interested in this. Can you find this for me? That kind of thing. Is that what happened? Yeah.
I mean, it was more me offering because nobody came to me because nobody knew who I was.
Okay.
But as I would see people purchasing around me, I would offer it to them.
Now you might wonder, where did the name Salvage Angel come from? It came from a local Asbury Park historian named Helen Pike. I got to speak with Helen by telephone.
At the time, there wasn't anybody doing any visible business in the salvage business. You had people doing auctions of things from historic properties, but you didn't have anybody trying to salvage a building before it came down or as it was coming down before it was bulldozed. And that came to me, and then it was just, I love the idea of an angel. She isn't an avenging angel. She's not a heraldic angel either, but she was somebody who passionately cared about saving these treasures from Asbury Park before they were lost forever. And so, yeah, it was just this burst of creativity that made me nickname her the Salvage Angel.
Like any business, Salvage Angel by the Sea has had its ups and downs. A major decision point came when Carolyn purchased her current location, a former Canada Dry warehouse. It came after a painful but valuable experience with her previous landlord.
I had moved out to a place in Howell for a hot minute, and we did a lot of work on the building and made it so that it was comfortable for us to do business there. And the landlord, after a year of renting and doing all this work, doubled my rent.
Wow.
And yeah. Yes. And he taught me a very, very, very big lesson. And that lesson is that I never wanted to have a landlord again. And especially when you have all of this heavy stuff that, as I explained to you earlier, my motto is to touch things once if possible. And so when you have to touch it again and again and move it around, it becomes a burden and not what you want in business.
While her landlord in Howell was a nightmare experience, the owner of the Canada Dry warehouse in Asbury Park was a blessing.
He was a gift. He is a gift. He had the place for sale for quite a few years, and he was very, very picky about who was going to purchase his building. He had made a good living here, and he wanted it to be in the hands of someone who was going to be able to build and grow and do as he did. It had very fond memories for him. And so he wasn't just going to give it to a developer to make money. He wanted to see what was going to happen here. And he has been back several times since to follow my progress. And he's very, very proud.
There are thousands of items that without you would be in a junkyard or thrown away or just recycled and that sort of thing. You really help them find a new life. Why is that important?
Just because there's a history that shouldn't be erased, and having the movies and TV, it's needed for those scenes to be shown. I look at our young workforce around. They don't even know what a phone booth is. I recognize all this stuff, and I've been really trying very, very hard to help assist in the history of this stuff.
Let's talk about that side of things. So originally, it sounds like this was restoration. You're selling to people who are fixing up houses in Asbury Park and at the Jersey Shore. And at some point, it transitioned or added on to that business is providing important pieces to movie sets. Is that a recent occurrence?
Yeah, it's much more recent. There's a couple of set decorators and designers that actually live in Asbury Park, one of which started shopping here probably about, I want to say, 7 years ago on a smaller scale. And as we grew, she taught me some things. She taught me what she looks for and in general what would be helpful to them. And fortunately, she did share with her coworkers and other folks in the business. And it's just slowly caught on.
What shows would we have seen this in, or movies or TV shows, that sort of thing?
Oh, gosh. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, The Godfather of Harlem, The Joker, West Side Story. Oh, gosh, there's so many. Pretty Little Liars.
From a financial perspective, has this been a profitable venture for you?
It's finally becoming a profitable venture. When you buy a 20,000 square foot building that is in major disrepair. Major disrepair. I mean, we funneled out water leaks that were happening upstairs for quite a while until we could afford to put a roof on the building. And so each year that we have been here, we've tried and had to do improvements to the building. And we're finally in a place where I could say that it's been a very fortunate thing that we were able to get this built.
I'm going to switch gears on you to what I call the advice section. What advice would you give to someone thinking about changing careers and maybe starting their own business?
Exactly what was taught to me. Do what you love. You have to. There's no other way. When you're passionate about something, you put 150% into what it is. You're not just punching a clock. You're not just a 9 to 5. It's the way you think. It's the way you live. It's the way, I mean, I live this business. This is not something that I dreamt of and created. It's something I live.
What's next for Salvage Angel and for you?
Oh dear. Again, nothing is premeditated.
Okay.
So who knows? I mean, Asbury Park is changing. The business world is changing. Netflix is coming. Netflix is
coming to New Jersey, yeah.
Coming to New Jersey. It's going to be here in Monmouth County. Whether this becomes a warehouse for Netflix, I never know what's a month away. I live the way I live because of not knowing. So I really wake up in the morning, take it on. I didn't know you were going to call me 3 weeks ago.
So there you have it, Carolyn Curtin, an everyday hairstylist who found her way to becoming New Jersey's Salvage Angel. Not a bad title for your resume.
Well, it's certainly a title that doesn't exist on my resume. So, but I have a couple of questions, Andy. It sounds like Carolyn is a bit of a one-woman army, especially in the way that she successfully led the transformation of her neighborhood one house at a time. Talk to me about the passion you saw in her.
So she is all about Asbury Park. You know, she walked into her house, the house that she bought. She absolutely fell in love with it. She fell in love with the neighborhood. She has certainly been one of the people leading the charge in terms of revitalizing Asbury Park. And, she and others who have invested in Asbury Park have been incredibly successful. It's a completely different place than it was 20 years ago when it was sort of crumbling and falling apart.
So that's local networking. And I know I always talk about the importance of business networking, which has led me to be very successful in what I'm doing. But it also sounds like it literally changed the direction of Carolyn's business. What are your thoughts on her ability to use her network to grow?
So the best example here is, I think it was 5 years ago, she met a single set decorator who lived in Asbury Park. That is now the renting and selling to film crews and production crews. That is now 70% of her business. She has met dozens of other set decorators. She's working closely with them, and it's all about networking. And it's taken her business in a completely different direction and very successful.
Which is a really good segue to my third question. Now, we hear this repeated in a number of our interviews. People who became successful without having a carefully crafted long-term strategy. What was your impression of Carolyn's ability to evaluate opportunities that lead to growth?
So in her case, I don't think there ever was any sort of a long-term plan, no business plan written down. But what she's really good at is when facing a decision point, she's able to make a decision quickly, and usually it's the right decision. The best example from the podcast today is, when her landlord doubled her rent. A lot of people would have been freaked out by that. She basically said, well, I'm not paying that, and said F that. And she, on a dime changed, found this new home at the warehouse in Canada Dry in Asbury Park and made a quick transition.
So the coolest part about that to me is that although if I don't have a business plan, I get very lost. But it sounds like Carolyn is the kind of person that just isn't encumbered by a business plan that she needs to stick to, and that's so cool.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting direction. She is more of a leaper than a planner, that's for sure. I think that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. If you'd like to nominate a second act story for the podcast, perhaps even your own story, we'd love to hear from you. Just visit our website at www.secondactstories.org and click on the Nominate a Guest box in the upper right-hand corner of our webpage.
If you have a friend or family member who's thinking about making a career change or even a life change, do them a favor and share our podcast with them. It might actually even be the inspiration they need to make a leap to a better life.
We hope you'll keep listening. There are more second act stories just around the corner.